Well, good morning. Welcome to the Winter Report. My name is Willie Lawson. Now, the headlines this week, they look like a ragtag collection of oddities. Woke nurses losing their license in Florida, anti-ICE activists embarrassing themselves at a restaurant in California, and a bizarre jailbreak attempt tied to a Florida man narrative involving Luigi Mangione. But underneath these stories is a powerful lesson about political narratives, cultural power, and electoral opportunity. Because for decades, the left has pushed a cultural script built on outrage, victimhood, institutional capture. But what happens when that script falls apart? Not because of any outside opposition, but because it contradicts, I don't know, basic reality. Here in Florida, ideological healthcare workers are learning that ethical obligations still matter. And in California, anti ICE activists show the world what happens when protest becomes fantasy. And in New York and Minnesota, the Florida man trope may have evolved into something more chaotic and troubling. And these aren't isolated anomalies. They are symptomatic of a broader crisis on the left and the opportunity for the right. Over the next few minutes, we'll look at each case in detail, expose deeper implications, and show how conservative America might leverage these episodes into a compelling narrative for voters. Okay. At the heart of the political and cultural debate in America is a question conservatives have been asking for years. What happens when ideology overtakes professional ethics? So here in Florida, the answer is growing insistence that professional responsibility cannot be overridden by political fervor. The Attorney General's office and the Surgeon General took action last week to revoke the nursing license of two individuals whose public, politically charged statements crossed the fundamental ethical boundaries. One nurse, identified as Eric Martindale, posted on social media that he would refuse to administer anesthesia to MACA patients, a clear violation of the basic duty of healthcare professionals are sworn to uphold. When Martindale claimed that his account was hacked, the damage was done by the time he claimed that. Because that's what they normally claim. Somebody hacked me. Yeah, right. Okay. Instead of hiding behind legalese or institutional protection, he chose to surrender his license voluntarily. A, a tacit acknowledgement that his behavior was indefensible. And another shocking incident, Boca Raton labor and delivery nurse Lexi Lawler was terminated after posting a video publicly expressing joy at the idea of physical harm coming to Caroline Levitt. Did you know Caroline Levitt is having a baby? A prominent political figure during childbirth, wishing serious injury upon any patient, let alone one whose political views differ from yours, is beyond the pale. The Florida Surgeon General acted swiftly, revoking Lawler's license and making clear that political hate speech with real world consequences will not be tolerated in professional settings. These actions echo a larger cultural moment where professional institutions, once hesitant to confront ideology within their ranks, are being held accountable by public opinion and political leadership alike. It underscores a fundamental truth. Voters and policymakers alike are no longer willing to let ideological burial grounds stand where they undermine ethical standards. Moreover, this situation highlights how conservative pressure can produce concrete results when government officials are willing to act decisively. Rather than delegitimizing these moves as partisan punishment, Florida leaders frame the problem as a matter of patient safety and professional integrity, something voters across the political spectrum can understand. The broader lesson, though, is that ideology without responsibility breeds distrust. When healthcare workers prioritize political animosity over care, they erode public confidence in institutions that should be beyond politics. When you, I don't know how many of you have experienced this, where you're going in for some serious surgery. I had triple bypass surgery, serious surgery, um, and I want to be sure that regardless of what people think, whether they've seen any of my videos or not, I've done almost 1,800 of them, that they aren't harboring some sort of weird hatred for me. Oh, he died. Sorry. Uh, but they're going to do their job. I want to have that trust. I don't want to have that thought in my head as the last thing that I remember as I drift off into La La Land with some good propofol. Propofol is a bomb, y'all. Anyway, I want to make sure. At least I want to be confident that people's political opinion can be put aside while they're doing their job, while they got me split open like a Christmas goose, right? Right. Okay, so here's the deal. Um, Again, the broader policy here is that ideology without responsibility breeds distrust. So when healthcare workers prioritize political animosity over care, they erode that very trust in the institution that should be beyond politics. Voters' response? Stripping credentials, enforcing ethical codes, is a model conservatives can champion nationwide. Now, if a Florida Nurses episode reveals a crisis of ethics overtaken by ideology, the anti-ICE activist debacle in California reveals a crisis of competence overtaken by ideology. In Linwood, California, a group of anti-ICE activists congregated in a restaurant with whistles and horns, and all this stuff, convinced they were confronting federal immigration officials. Instead, they had mistakenly targeted TSA administration employees who were just eating. Not that we've all had, well, we haven't had opportunity to be angry at TSA, right? But if this had been an anti-TSA protest, I might have been down with it. However, it was nonsense. They had mistaken these TSA employees because they had something written on their back, um, official or something like that on their back. So yeah, law enforcement had to intervene because of any credible ICE presence, but because of an angry mob disputed disrupted private citizens' dinner. This isn't. I think it's funny. It isn't just a funny misunderstanding, but it illuminates several troubling trends on the left. First, a pattern of activism divorced from context and verification. Protesters act on rumor and assumption rather than fact. So when leftist movements habitually treat their beliefs as axioms rather than hypotheses, they distance themselves from reality. When a protest against immigration enforcement ends up harassing unrelated federal workers, it becomes less about policy and more about spectacle. Second, this episode highlights a failure of messaging. The activists clearly believe they represent moral righteousness, but when the moral fury replaces factual grounding, the message collapses, right? That's why this isn't just a stumble, it's a strategic failure. A movement that can't distinguish TSA agents from ICE agents undermines its own credibility and dilutes the impact of genuine grievances. Third, there's a broader cultural rigidity at play. These activists weren't just wrong, they were defensive and dismissive when confronted with their own error. While rather than just acknowledging a mistake, we screwed up. Oh my God, how embarrassing. The instinct among participants was to attack the messengers, especially when the messenger was associated with the conservative media. This reflexive hostility toward any contradictory narrative is a hallmark of performative left wing politics. And before we go to that, we're going to talk about something that is kind of like that. I got this. This note from my one of my last videos that I'll share with you at the end of this one. So hang around because I think it's funny. The story also points to the responsibility of law enforcement and local authorities. Instead of enabling political agitation to get out of hand, deputies intervene to protect innocent individuals and restore peace. This offers a contrast to the narrative that law enforcement somehow protects establishment interests against grassroots movements. In this case, the law simply preserved order, which should have been a baseline expectation in a lawful society. Finally, this incident has national implications. It's not this merely another protest gone wrong. It's about the credibility gap that emerges when activists prioritize confrontation over coherent policy advocacy. Conservatives can exploit this gap by emphasizing responsible debate, respect for institutions, and factual discourse over spectacle. The third thread tying these news stories together is the bizarre saga surrounding Luigi Mangione, a figure so enveloped in controversial headlines that even the classic Florida man narrative seems quaint by comparison. The folks at Town Hall reported that a Minnesota resident was arrested after impersonating an FBI agent in a failed attempt to free Mangione from federal custody, armed with a pizza cutter and a barbecue fork. That would be Jesus. The bizarre attempt effect of a jailbreak didn't just read like a headline from a satirical newspaper. This is not from. This is real. This actually happened. It reveals the chaotic intersection of crime, media attention, and the public fascination with fringe figures. At its core, this story underscores how certain narratives evolve in media culture. Florida Man becomes a meme because of the sheer absurdity of crime stories coming out of the Sunshine State. But when you have a high profile assassination suspect, a bizarre jailbreak attempt, and a mob of supporters seemingly willing to take this ludicrous action, it suggests that our cultural fixation with spectacle has intensified beyond the absurd into the irrational. But but beneath that absurdity lies something more consequential. Okay, when public attention gravitates towards outlandish behavior, serious policy issues get drowned out by bizarre noise. Conservatives should resist the trap by reframing the focus toward law and order, the rule of law, and the consequence of glorifying disorder. This episode also illustrates a broader social dysfunction. When individuals believe that they can impersonate law enforcement and attempt a jailbreak with cooking utensils, it reflects a breakdown in civic norms and respect for institutions. It is a symptom of a society where extreme partisanship and reality distortion have blurred the line between symbolic protest and actionable crime. Okay, and for conservative audiences, this offers a teaching moment. Rather than indulging in sensationalism, the right can emphasize the importance of maintaining civil society, upholding the rule of law, and rejecting both ideological fanaticism and performative spectacle, linking these themes back to the broader concerns about crime and safety, cultural stability, helps anchor political discourse in values voters care about. All right, taken together, these stories of Florida's corrective actions against woke nurses, the anti-activist misadventures, and the Luigi Mangione jailbreak attempt reveal deeper truths. Ideology untethered from reality breeds chaotic. Professional ethics matters and cultural narratives that can't be ceded to spectacle and absurdity without consequence. For conservatives, these episodes are more than quirky news items. They are proof points of a larger narrative about how to govern, how to engage in policy debates, and how to win back public confidence from a left that often prioritizes outrage over responsibility because voters are paying attention. They're noticing when one side protects professional standards, respects legal norms, and stays grounded in reality, while the other is increasingly associated with spectacle, error, and public confusion. This convergence of stories isn't random. It's a window into the political moment of 2026, a moment conservatives can shape into a compelling narrative for growth, accountability, and principled leadership in American politics. Okay, I, I mentioned that I would say something about this comment. Now, normally, I don't think, you know what? I don't think I've ever done this. I don't think I've ever mentioned a comment on a video that I've gotten. I like it to, a view is a view is a view. Thank you. And you know what? And it helps the channel not only when you watch it, but when you comment. I think that's great. Thank you so much. But I got this comment from Joe Sullivan -19R, and it reads this. It reads, "It seems odd that a Christian would call liberals dangerous. Liberals are the advocates for welcoming strangers, feeding the hungry, housing the poor, and healing the sick. All things that Jesus advocates for. And Republicans fight against at every opportunity to the point they are," and I didn't get the rest of it. So yeah. And this is common. This is a common response from the left because they want to make you, Christians, live up to their ideal of what Christianity is, advocating for the hungry. Now, when the when the truth is something different, when the truth is something entirely different, because the reality of it is that when you get the data back on charitable giving through an empirical lens, the short answer is complicated, but is credible evidence suggesting that on average, conservatives, especially in the US, give more money to charity than liberals. More money to welcome strangers, feed the hungry, house the houseless, take care of the poor, feed the hungry. And it's particularly when you look at the raw donation totals giving to religious charities. Overall giving amounts, real quick. A major meta-analysis of 31 empirical studies found that political conservatives tend to be more charitable than liberals when you look at total charitable giving overall. Meaning conservatives, on average, give more dollars to charity than liberals. This holds a broad aggregated, this holds at a broad aggregated level, accounting for differences across many studies. And here's the role of religiosity. A big driver in this pattern of religiosity is this: conservatives in the US are more likely to attend religious services and give to their own congregations. Since church giving makes up a huge portion of total charitable contributions, this skews conservatives towards higher. That makes sense, right? But some analysis suggests that if you strip out the church donations, liberal and conservatives, about the same. But what happens is they give more. We give more all the time. All the time. When you compare donations to secular nonprofits, there may be a difference. But on average, in the US, conservatives give more money to charities overall. And yes, especially because of religious giving and church contributions. There you go. We just don't give money to Planned Parenthood. So when Joe, you talk about housing the poor and healing the sick, you don't talk about abortion, killing the children. You don't talk about that. I didn't see that in your comments. That you care more about killing the children. You care more about people who break the law, people who are the strangers that come into our country and rape and murder. I didn't see you talk about that. Now, what I'm not going to do is have this constant back and forth because for engagement purposes, I'm not going to do that because first of all, I don't like doing it. Second of all, I'm not going to. I don't have time or energy for it. But this hit me this morning kind of weird, like it's another attempt of people who say that they're Christian and they're really not. Oh yeah, he said if I'm indeed a Christian that I'm the worst type of Christian ever, right? And may God have mercy on my soul. Well, I would pray that God would have mercy on my soul anyway, because that's the thing. Anyway, I gotta get out of here. Thank you ever so much. Enjoy a cup of 7 Weeks coffee. Order yours today. Use the morning report as the discount code. And please, until we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourselves. We will see you when we see you. Bye bye now.